I'm going to take a look. Oh, whoa, who's this? Why should I click and read further? Then when you include your disco link, less is more. If someone wants to send me 20 cuts, I'd say send me your top 5.
This is Charles Levan, CEO of Blue Buddha Entertainment, a sync agent, pub admin, and educator within the sync licensing space. With over 27 years in the music industry, he's represented some of the biggest independent artists in the industry. His company has been featured on big shows like This Is Us, Lost, Atlanta, All American, Criminal Minds, Grey's Anatomy, and many more. And in this episode, we get into the mind of a sync agent. He shares the art of pitching, how to build personal connections in the industry, building a community in a podcast, and how to get on his radar, diversity in the sync licensing space, and even what kind of music he's currently looking for in his catalog. Well, how do you feel about that artist or producer following up with you? Do you follow up with your clients? Like, how does that look to you?
Great question.
I'm your host, Nathan Foreman, aka Excalibur Zero, a full-time musician, sharing my own journey of building out a sync agency, and you're listening to the music licensing podcast, The Realm. I feel like I have like a civil duty here because you're one of the few sync agencies out there that actually does education and also has your own agency as well as pitch. And there's not many people out there like that. And I also do education. So I feel like I have a civil duty to ask the correct questions, not only for like artists or composers, but even for myself, just learning from you and picking your brain with your experience. Charles, can you please tell us a little bit about who you are, your catalog, Blue Buddha Entertainment, and what was the vision behind building out your catalog?
Absolutely. Nathan, and much respect and mutual respect. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast this morning. And so started out in 2002 back in the day, forming Blue Buddha with 2 other business partners. And at the time, we found a lane in the niche to really dial into working with the independent artists. So that was the core focus back then. And prior to that, I cut my teeth in the 90s. I got the gray hair to show it. EMI Capitol Records, working back catalogs for like Al Green, Philly International Soul, Solar Records. So radio and marketing was the bloodline of my career that really cut my teeth in the industry. And then was there for about 7 years. And as everything dynamic in the industry, just like we're seeing today, was laid off. So 2002 presented an opportunity to form Blue Buddha with a business partner who he was a supervisor, and so jumped into Blue Buddha, been doing it ever since, parted with business partners and went on their own way. And core focus, independent artists and labels. And as you know, Nathan, one-stop rep wins the day. But now, with things there's no shortage of music. Competition is immense. When I started, there was a handful of sync agents. There was always the labels and the publishers pitching their catalogs. And for sync agents and libraries, the door was still very narrow and focused. Now, fast forward 25 plus years later, it's ubiquitous. I saw you 3-4 months back at the Guild of Music Supervisors, and the sentiment for the veterans in the industry, it comes down to the relationship, of course, one. But as you know, and congrats to your successes, it's all about having the right track and the timing. Right place, right time. I was talking with Burt Blackerack the other day. Shout out to Burt. He was talking about, supervisors will go to their go-to list. Who's on top of their mind? Oh, Blue Buddha excels in hip-hop, electronic, singer-songwriter. What are we working on? So that's, my passion from having been on the label side and cultivating independent artists. It still rings through today, Nathan, is, what excites me every day getting out of bed is who's that next big artist? Who's going to be the next Doechii? Who's going to be the next Chapel Roan? And we're right in it. You're in Norwalk, I'm here in LA, and hey, we're in the capital of Music City, USA.
100%. Yeah, I love that you have so much advocacy for independent artists. It seems like that's really what cultivates kind of the message behind your company. And from when I was doing my research, it just seems like you have so many outlets for independent artists to kind of make their way through sync, and not just like it's a lot of artists, when they try to get into sync, they just think that like they need to make sync ready music and just they can just jump right into it. But you kind of educate the admin and the business side of it too as well, like sharing metadata tips and different like the both sides of a track and stuff like that. I think it's very important. And I kind of want to go back to what your message was earlier about how we saw each other at GMS Awards. And funny story, the year before I saw you at the GMS Awards, I already knew who you were, but I never had the confidence to go up to you because it was my first event 2 years ago going to the award show. I've been to the conference, and I remember one of your artists came up. We shook hands, we met, and I think his name was Freddie, and he has like a producer who goes with him, and he goes, "Hey, have you seen Charles from Blue Buddha? We're looking for him. We want to meet him because we're in his community." And I was like, "Yeah, I actually just saw him. He just passed by." So it's funny that fast forward a year later, I had like the confidence to come up and approach you and finally shake your hand and meet you. So I want to know, what's a project in your field that you've worked on that kind of give you that confidence to show you like, hey, I can really do this. Like, I can make this into something.
Wow. Well, going back, I would say, and thanks, Nathan. And I think what we have in common is at the core of it, that passion for music and being real, genuine people. As we know, the music industry full of sharks. What was that film? Swimming with Sharks, right?
Right, definitely.
But to find, just like when you said, "Hey, Charles from Blue Buddha," I said, "Hey, what's going on?" Positive energy reciprocates positive energy, and our orbit, if you will. And shout out to like the Fingas. Right. There's a handful of folks who everyone we talk to, we're connected by 1 degree.
Right.
And, I think more than ever, what we're seeing in the industry, existential threats. We got AI, we had the actor writer strike, we had the fires, we had the pandemic. So I think the overall message is for independent artists and supervisors and fellow colleagues is how can we help each other and collaborate and network and continue to build the community, because we've gotten this far for a reason. And we're the gatekeepers, yourself and other sync agents and producers, serving up great music to supervisors. At the end of the day, it's their projects. We work with the studios, make sure they have the right music, clears the budget. And to answer your question, wow. I mean, when I started in 2002, it was like One Tree Hill, Smallville. I think when I got my placement in Lost, that show on ABC, that was like, I felt like I arrived. And then on the flip side of that coin, I'm a huge U2 fan, and we had a song in a Red campaign that U2 does. And to being 1 degree away from Bono and U2 and The Edge and Larry Mullen Jr., having a placement in a ad like that kind of cemented Blue Buddha's place for independent artists.
That's awesome, man. That's a crazy story how that's like all connected. Like you said, it is like it seems like a big industry, but it is very close. Like it is very connected. So it's so weird that just meeting one person can introduce you to another, and it's all by, I don't even know if it's by accident. I think you guys kind of talked about this in your podcast with DJ Birch. Is like, is it luck, or is it, like, is it just hard work? And he was kind of telling the story of how his neighbor and everything like that, how everything kind of aligned, almost by accident, but it also was purposeful. But that's something actually I appreciate about your content as well, is that you like to do your research, and that's something I'm really big on too as well. Something I noticed from your earlier post that you had on your page is that you like to study the music that's used in TV, right? So you like to break down tracks and the genre. Can you share the importance of studying music in sync, and what are you looking for when you come across a soundtrack or a playlist shared from a TV show or a series?
100%. And, I think the great analog we can use is, and I'll keep it at the basic level, granular level, if you will, Nathan, is, if we're selling shades of paint, there's thousands of paint stores, but the supervisor needs a particular shade of what's called cerulean blue. So specific. And those nuances is where you and I excel. If I know we're pitching to various shows right now, and the country lane is exploding, but there's straight ahead country, there's hybrid country with R&B or electronics and pop. that hybrid sound. So if you and I, we get a brief from the supervisor, and, if we pitch up cuts that don't work, they're not going to call us back. We wasted their time. And the best example I always give, and to answer your question, is, going back, we reverse engineer a show. What did they use? What's the sound? And then we'll look at the briefs and those details. And Nathan, if we're lucky enough, we'll get some reference tracks in there. But the best analogy is, if you and I were supers and we reached out to our top 10 list of contacts, and they send us 10 tracks each, that's 100 cuts we got to go to. Now, let's say half of them, 50 were off, wrong sound, wrong element. We just wasted 2-3 hours listening to 50 cuts. And time is money, money is time. And that's that importance of checking off the boxes. And I'll thread it 100%, Nathan, is same with metadata. If you and I are working with an artist and they send us the cuts, missing info, the metadata is wrong, that eats up our time and our day. And it's all about efficiency and workflow, as you know, and now more than ever, we got thousands of tracks in our disco playlist. So
Right. Yeah. Metadata is so big. I spent, like I told you this off camera, but I spent 7 months as an unpaid intern, and my entire job was to keyword all of the imported tracks that were coming in for each drop. So each quarter there'd be a new drop, and there were, thousands of tracks, and I don't have to go through there. And at times it felt like mundane, and I'm like, I didn't really understand the importance of having all the proper metadata across the board, because at the end of the day, if you see if you're able to see a whole process, a bird's eye view, there's a point where either like a director, a music supervisor, sometimes even people who work in the post-production are able to search through these catalogs, and these keywords are showing up as SEO. So I love that you really hone in on that, because not many people will share that perspective in how to even properly do metadata. It's something I really appreciate. Something about your platform and your podcast. Speaking of your podcast, you have something called Sync Riffs, which is your podcast. You can see the logo in the background if you guys are watching. Can you talk about how that kind of came into fruition? Like, what was the idea behind bringing a platform and kind of educating the independent artist side of this space?
Yeah, 100%. And out of dark times creates light and hope. And that was the time of pandemic. So I said, productions are shut down. What are we going to do? So my wife and I, we were brainstorming, and she's a writer, former teacher. And we came up with this concept of shining a spotlight on music supervisors, producers, and also artists, and doing it with the integrity of, just as you're doing as well, let the guest be the star, and really supervisors and producers and showrunners, it's sort of, until this day, that unlocked mystery of what they do, how hard it is. Creatively, they're balancing creative aspects and then the budget. And I just wanted to keep it straight up real with Sync Riffs, and we're in the 3rd season. And that kind of dovetailed, Nathan, as well, going into hosting virtual panels, educational panels. I'm an advocate for whether it's AAPI month, and then Black History Month, Black Music Month, and just that melting pot of working with independent artists. And because, again, I always tell artists is, I'm like the quarterback or the point guard, whatever analogy you want to use. And if it wasn't for the creatives and the artists, I would be staring at a blank computer screen. And and so, it takes a village. Same with the creative aspect is, more than ever, I love this analogy of, in this industry we love so much is, quote, I don't know where I got this, but, we all eat at the same table. And sometimes if I get a brief, if I don't have a cut, I'll tell the supervisor I'm not going to waste their time. I'll pass. But maybe I'm collabing with yourself or DeFingas. What do we have collectively that we can pitch? And then we work it out. And at the end of the day, the supervisor gets the creative cut they need. It's transparent. We clear it. and then we eat at the same table, and a percentage of something is better than zero and losing to a competitor. So yeah, it's the through line is advocacy for independent artists. And I think that's, our longevity together, building this community and doing it the right way, and keeping it fully transparent.
This isn't part of, I have my notes here for questions to ask you. This isn't part of my notes. This is something that I've witnessed while interviewing right now. Like, you have such a passion for collaboration and honestly spirituality, which I can get into a whole different like podcast on. I just noticed the way that you answer your questions. It comes from that presence. But to key on the collaboration side of it, where does that stem from? Like, why are you so open to collaborating and giving a helping hand? Like, was there someone for you that gave you that opportunity? Is that just something that comes natural to you in life? Like, where does that stem from? Because not many people are that open and like that. So I really want to, I'm curious to where that came from.
I appreciate that, Nathan. And serendipitously, my late father, he was a professor at UCLA, and being in education, I think as a child, he always cultivated that in me and supported my path into the industry. Initially, way back, my folks were like, be an accountant. Like lots of my accountant people and money, but I'm a creative. So I went to business school, Cal State Northridge, got a bachelor's in business administration. Later went back to get an MBA in marketing, and straight out of tying back to what you said about Burt Bacharach and luck, graduated. My first internship was at Capitol Records and was there for about 4 weeks. And once they realized, I wasn't doing it for school credit, that almost came to a close. But within those 4 weeks, I proved myself, and that turned into a position straight out of the gates. So timing, hard work, and the ethos, to your question, is that team spirit and that community. Back in the 90s, it was all about the music. I worked at Capitol. Gary Gersh was the president of Capitol, came from Geffen Records. So we had Radiohead, Beastie Boys, the Grand Royal label. We had Nat King Cole. We had the urban department. We had the alt rock department, and the Virgin Records was Blur, Oasis, not Oasis, but Blur, and all the Brit pop. So such a great time. Mariah Carey, and there was everybody supported everybody in the 90s label wise, and I think that kind of reinforced my passion for working with others together. And I'll use that basketball analogy that I used with Burt Bacharach is, if we're building that team of 5, I want to know, sort of a la Kobe Bryant, is, do the other 4 players have my back? And together in the music industry, similarly, hey, let's keep building, because without each other, we can't do it alone.
100%. I love that you brought up that Kobe analogy. That comes from I'm pretty sure a podcast, right? He talks about his teammate came up to him. He's like, "Hey, Kobe, I just want to know, like, I just want to make sure that like you have my back, or like you care about. He's like, "What? Of course, you're my teammate." So I love that you kind of bring that mindset into this space, because there's so many different areas in the music industry, and so many people have their own personalities, and they kind of cultivate that culture. And depending on that culture is how it kind of relates to the next space. And we're seeing more people get into this sync space, as you mentioned, like back before in 2002 is way different. Even when I got my start in 2014, way different than what it is now. So the fact that you take the time to bring that collaboration mindset is appreciated, because that's something I'm very big on. Like, I'm very artist-centric first. That's kind of the vision behind building out the company that we built out so far, is like really supporting the independent artist, which is why I was excited. And I told you at the beginning that this is an important podcast to me, because you already bring that, bring that energy. And going back to Sync Riffs, you brought up DJ Burt, and I want to know if there's an episode or guest that was the most insightful for you as a sync agent from Sync Riffs so far in your 3rd season.
Wow. I would say from the early days, or more recently, actually a sneak peek, it's going to air next week. I had Deva Anderson and Rachel Lotzenheiser from Tom Hanks's production company, the Playtone company, and all their work, Band of Brothers, Masters of the Air. But together, Rachel and Deva had worked together for over a decade. And just the wealth of information, and then flipping that side of the coin, similarly working with Anne Klein, a veteran from back in the day, working with her on ER. And it's funny, Nathan, because, we're both here in LA, but the way the industry is with email, sometimes you'll never meet a supervisor. It's just all through email. Same with Anne. I had worked with her on ER back in the day on Shameless. And then with the podcast, it was like, oh my God, we should have connected earlier. But it's sort of, I think, what I always talk about in the past in mentoring artists is, go to events like the Guild of Music Supervisors conference, the awards ceremony, and be seen FaceTime in person with supervisors and decision makers. And so when they do get that email from you, they're like, that aha moment. Like, yeah, I met Nathan and he was a great guy and we connected, and that's all it takes to hopefully open the door.
Right. 100%. I think that's so important. It's weird because for me, I was such a homebody. Especially working for a music library, I was really, I work from home. So all the admin work I was doing at home. And once I left and started educating and getting to the space of eventually starting this company, it kind of opened that door that, wow, I need to go out there. I need to shake more hands. And it's cool because we've spoken at events, you and I, not at the same time, not even knowingly, like NAMM and stuff like that. And I'm sure those have opened doors for you as well with other opportunities with, different artists and stuff like that. And I want to know if there's like a cold email or if there's a networking event that you've been to that really stuck out to you for a specific artist that kind of got your attention and kind of cultivated into an opportunity from those moments, speaking of networking.
Yeah, I think, tip of the hat back in the day to, it is now defunct, but when the Honey Pot, yeah. So like those events. And I think, bigger conferences, like if it's South by Southwest or NAMM, sometimes they're just too big. So like to your point, Nathan, I think the Guild of Music Supervisors, the conference at summer is more intimate. It's easier to connect with folks. And if an artist comes up and says, hey, love to chat, I think, from there, I've met some great artists, and the educational side of things is, critical there, and learning from our peers, learning from our colleagues, because, back to, same with education, every day there's something new to learn. I mean, you and I, this could be a part 2 chat, because navigating, since recently, within the last year, we've expanded to publishing administration, helping artists administer their publishing. So sometimes, because I'll see a lot of independent artists, and you can tell if you've seen the same, Nathan, is they'll put on their socials, hey, I got a placement, I got 10 placements. And then I'll reach out to them and say, hey, do you have anyone administering your publishing? And they'll say, well, what does that mean? Are you being my publisher? Am I going to get an advance? So the nice thing about pub admin is an artist still retains their publishing. And as an administrator, we have a team who's collecting performance income, pennies, worldwide. So that could be streaming, mechanical downloads when your song is downloaded or purchased. And for Sync, as you and I know, Nathan, worldwide, song airs on Grey's Anatomy, Japan, Germany, foreign territories. There's, quote, what we call collect at the source. And that's why those shrewd artists who either have a publisher or an administrator, if the money's not collected in foreign territories, it goes into what's called the black box. And that black box, the money, there's a statute of limitations, 3 to 5 years depending. that money that's not collected, it gets split amongst everybody else. So if you're an independent artist, you don't see that money. And that's what Burt Bacharach was talking about. The system is so confusing for purpose, and sometimes it labels and publishers, major labels, you see it all the time. Artists come out, big artists, and they'll sue a publisher or a label and said, hey, royalties unaccounted for. I wasn't paid royalties. And that's where we try and advocate and educate independent artists of other revenue streams. Anyways, that could be part 2, streaming. We can, because good old days, just like when you started, same with 2014, ABC, NBC, CBS, traditional broadcast networks, that mailbox money was a lot more. Now with streamers, it's kind of light, but we'll see where we are in, say, 5 to 10 years.
Right. So it shifts too quickly. This is my first kind of going through that cycle, so I wasn't expecting. It's cool because you have that foresight, and when COVID came, automatically you had the idea to adjust. And I think a lot of people had the idea to adjust, but in the sync space, I think it was important because so much has changed since then. But from an artist perspective, this is for the artist. In episode 2 of Sync Riffs, you talked about the art of the pitch, and you mentioned that you like to pitch music that has like a radio friendly feel. Can you define what that means to you, and what kind of makes a great track?
Great question. And you're taking me way back to that episode 2 with my colleague, Chase Walker. And I'm a radio guy at heart. So having cut my teeth in the 90s and hearing cuts like Let's Stay Together by Al Green, I Can't Stand the Rain by Ann Peeble, right there in itself, the song title, Al Green's falsetto, and the production from Willie Mitchell, or even Ann Peeble's cut, I Can't Stand the Rain. So the hook, it could be a vocal hook, it could be the melody, those elements is within that first minute and a half of a cut. We all know those huge cuts, Happy by Pharrell.
Mm-hmm.
It just hits you. You feel it. And that emotion, I always tell independent artists, and it's cliche, but it's true, quoting, Randy Jackson from American Idol, is, I got to feel it. We got to feel that emotion. And I think, you yourself as I see all your studio setup, and I was, as an artist, less is more sometimes. With now, I was talking with Burt Bacharach, I said to him, what's your setup, Burt? Do you have a combination of hardware and DAW? And he said, all DAW, all DAW. And there in itself is a curse, because then you're like, I got 100 plugins, my Logic's exploding.
Right.
And then the creative seed you planted gets buried, and it's just, and then you go down that spiral of what's good for the track, and do I keep retweaking the track, and when is it right to finish the cut? So I think, less is more. Start with that strong, of course, the lyrics, the storytelling, and then build around that with strong instrumentation, and try something that hasn't been done before. Back in 2012, I worked with a group called Gangsta Grass. They were melding hip hop with bluegrass. So I get this record, and I'm trying to think of the producer's name, but I was like, Gangsta Grass, what? So then when I heard it, it was like, I had never heard cuts like this. So I pitched it. We got about 10, 12 placements. They ended up doing the theme song for Justified on FX. And I'll have to look up, they're still around performing, but that is back full circle to Thread. You might have read it, but in the 90s, I got into DJing.
Yeah.
So Public Enemy, hip hop, a little bit, and then I went to my first rave in like 88. So seeing artists like Bjorg and 808 State, and you would see Africa Bambaataa sampling Kraftwerk, Trans Euro Express. So that marriage of different styles to create something new is how my brain works as a sync agent. What hasn't been done before?
Mm.
And how can we push that envelope creatively, working with our independent artists and advise them? Now I'm taking a producer hat role as well. I have a collaboration with some songwriters where we write custom music for pitches, and then I get to play producer and meld a songwriter with a producer. And hey, take me back to Capitol. Let's produce some cuts together and play the odds at Vegas, and let's try and land a big car ad.
Right. I love that. I love that part about it. Something you did really well right there is tell a story too. You were telling a story. That's something you honed into it as well as like the art of storytelling. So for artists, is it important then? Because you talked about the even the track titles, right? It's for happy and everything like that. Um, does storytelling and the title matter to you when you're kind of looking to think about pitching a track, or how does your mindset work in that space?
Great question, Nathan. And they go hand in glove for sure. Um, the saying of what you see is what you get. The song
Mm,
title should definitely mirror, if I'm pitching a melancholy love interest cut, I would hope that song title gives me an inclination that it's a breakup tune and not called, happy moments, because that's also a tip for supervisors or a sync agent. If we're scanning through our catalog real quick, we got a brief, we got a half hour, and then we put that search word in. And the search engine in Disco is only as good as the tags that are in the metadata and also the song title. So from the song title, if I wean my list down to say 5 cuts, and then I'm gonna drill down, Nathan, on the lyrics. Hopefully with sync, as we all know, uh, more general lyrics versus not being too specific. An example I always give is, if we wrote a cut and we talked about we're driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, and it's a sunny day, and we're naming a time, place, or location. It's so specific and on the nose that could limit a pitch because the scene has to mirror the lyrics and emotion of the song. So those nuances uh, is what I always advise artists at the end of the day, though, is write authentic songs from the heart. And I don't know if you've seen this, but more and more I'll see some briefs from supervisors that say no synthesizers,
mm.
not even DAW or real synthesizers, I should say. They want going back to real instrumentation.
Organic, yeah.
Organic, yes, thank you. So, you know, it's that's kind of that, thanks to yourself and your podcast, my podcast, the resources are out there for artists to do their homework, and that's one half of it. You do your homework, you can serve up some amazing cuts. The mix of the master has to be unparalleled. You're competing with frontline artists and fellow colleagues, but once, sure, folks can publish the information of all the supervisors, but we're the gatekeepers, so to speak, because we're battle tested, we're vetted. The studios trust us, the supervisors trust us. So if you're an artist and you send a cold email to the supervisor, their inbox, they're getting 5,000 emails, if not
Yeah.
more.
Right.
So, but yeah, I wanted to, similarly, just as a dialogue, Nathan, what would your advice be similarly for artists if they're sending you cuts and they say, "Hey, I want to work with you, Nathan"? Is there anything that you kind of you look for when you get cuts unsolicited?
I think I kind of mirror your sentiment about just being authentic. A lot of people think that like since you're getting to the sync space, you need to have sync ready music or they need to dilute kind of their music, and that's the biggest mistake. A lot of these companies now are looking for just authentic music, like real music that they can just find on TikTok or Spotify. And if you really listen to like the insight coming from so many supervisors, where they're looking sometimes for independent artists when they're just scrolling by is through like Spotify or even TikTok and stuff like that. So I think that
Yeah.
whenever we get a pitch, I really look for people who do their research, like their homework. If someone Like we have a page set up for a contact form, and then we also have a page set up where artists can submit. A lot of times people just send straight to that contact form, which is not for the artist. The artist has their own little page that they can submit to, and that to me shows like, are you reading? Are you just getting a list and just copying and pasting, or are you actually doing your research? So I think if they take the time to do the research on pitching to us, they'll also take the time on their craft, and I really respect the artistry. I really respect the whole dynamic of just the emotion that goes into it, telling a story that's attached to something that's real in your life or something that you imagined, a feeling that's inside you or you're motivated by. You can kind of hear that within the music, and that's something I typically look for. I really like that question. Yeah, it's usually what I look for when we're getting new submissions and stuff like that.
Plus one. Couldn't said it better. And keep it simple. I'll see folks write a huge email. It's like a stored paragraph. And then the biggest thing I'll say is, include the link straight out instead of saying, "Hey, can I send you music?" Because that's another email requires a reply, and boom, like back in the old school day of the elevator pitch. Nowadays, not even 60 seconds, 30 seconds or less on an email. Here, who I am, three bullet points, a link to your bio, and here's the music. And when I was at NAM with the lead singer of Smash Mouth, Zach Goody, someone asked him that question and said, "Hey, what will get my attention?" So I always said in the subject heading, put a huge accolade. If you said, "Hey, this album was produced by a big producer or Grammy nominated," I'm going to take a look. Oh, whoa, who's this? Why should I click and read further? And then when you include your disco link, less is more. I mean, if say someone wants to send me 20 cuts, I'd say send me your top five and then mix it up. Two up tempo, two down tempo, two party songs, two love songs, and show your diversity. Triple threat analogy or whatever analogy you want to use. Because if someone says to me, "Hey, I got 20 love songs," and that's something I teach in a sync course, there's, four other buckets of there's love songs, party songs, trials and tribulations. And if you're just a one lane artist with one degree of emotion, it's kind of tough for us to try to pitch to other briefs. So, but yeah.
So my follow-up question to that, let's say if an artist does reach out to you, they do everything you just said, but they don't hear back from you because you get busy. It's life. You got, hundreds of emails coming through you probably a day. So how do you feel about that artist or producer following up with you? What is your kind of your guidelines with that? Do you follow up with your clients? Like, how does that look to you?
I would say give a couple of weeks or so with the follow up. And then in the follow up email, if there's something that wasn't articulated in the first email, create that FOMO for me. So I want like, I should have checked out the email because there was a cut in there. Maybe it's blown up on radio,
Mm,
or from the point of view of like an artist manager or a collab, you could say, "Hey, I just did this track and it's a collab with one of the producers who worked with Dochi," and they put that in bold. And here's a song. And true story, a fellow colleague, she was saying back in the day, she got a bunch of emails. Someone wanted to collab with her. She didn't have time. Things got busy. And about fast forward two years in the future, she saw her name performing somewhere. And guess who the artist was? And I'll give you a hint. Uh, the initials of the artist is, I'll get her first name was Taylor, and the last initial is with an S.
oh, no way.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift. Oh no.
Yes. So she was like, she could have collabed. And Taylor Swift was like, "Hey, I've been following your career. I won't name her name. I've been following your career. Let's collab." And that's just one of those examples you never know.
Right.
And maybe, like you said, that's where we lean on virtual assistants to help comb through our inbox.
Right. 100%. So this kind of leads me. I have a couple questions that kind of are in the mindset of the artist too as well. Um, how can an artist kind of get on your radar, and what are some styles of music that or genres that you're currently looking to grow inside of your catalog, if that's something that you're open to doing?
First and foremost, I would say, and since IG is sort of our calling card, definitely follow us on um, social media. Uh, so at Blue Buddha Ent, and then get on our radar there. And then as far as styles go, I'm just gonna pull up my list here. And first and foremost, with everything that's popping with the country lane and those blends of not just straight up country, but country with a little bit of hip hop or electronic. Definitely looking for that. And then the other lane, um, just going back to the roots of whether it's R&B or singer songwriter, just really authentic cuts that more than ever right now everything's going in the world. I always tell artists is there's a cycle of what's happening in the world. A lot of the TV shows are going to mirror what's happening. We had COVID 2, 3, 4 months later, then we had procedural medical shows that are mirroring what's happening in the world. And those types of songs are going to be needed to support on screen the visual. So, right authentic, I always go back Hard Times by Run DMC. Still to this day, talking about hard times, inflation,
Right.
wars. And that cut, talk about an evergreen track that still holds true today of, what I call trials and tribulations. So, anyways, the storytelling um, and just being able to connect with an artist. I can't remember who said it, but might have been going back to Bono U2, but music at best should take us somewhere. It's a journey. Uh, the Beatles' White Album, Al Green's Love and Happiness cut. We had a long day. You and I were both parents. Put on that record. The kids are put to bed. Put on that Marvin Gaye. Put on that Al Green, and just be in that moment
Mm,
and forget about the world for a moment and know that we brought it to the mat 110%, and tomorrow's a new day. And music is that ethos to, remind us of every moment that we're here on this planet is a gift. And without music, I don't know what we what we would do.
right.
So yeah.
That was beautifully connected. I think there was a lot of hidden gems there. And if I'm an artist listening to this, I think that you just shared a ton of insight that is super important. Especially just bringing up the fact that the music industry and the TV industry, it kind of mirrors itself. I love that you even brought up the COVID example. I think that was very smart to bring that up too, because I never thought of it in that aspect. I always like to share that TV is typically like one year behind, 2 years behind of like what the current scene is. So you're probably hearing a lot of requests for like Shabuzi, that style, stuff like that. So it's cool that you kind of share that, 'cause I feel like that's an underrated gem for anybody who's looking for opportunity right now in this space. So, speaking of sharing gems, can you tell us a little bit more about your third annual virtual panel that you're going to be hosting? Who's invited? What can people expect? What's it for? I saw it's for AAPI next month. So, can you kind of elaborate on that and who's able to attend?
Yes, no, and thanks so much for bringing that up. But so, and we'll put the links in the bio. But basically, it's our third annual to celebrate music supervisors in the AAPI space, Asian American Pacific Islander. So Elaine Schur from So Stereo. We've got Brittany Dozier who's coming back. Also Lava Hong, Rachel Latzenheiser, and two other supervisors. So six total. It's a 1 hour virtual panel on May 22nd, if I remember off the top of my head, at 11 a.m. Pacific. And basically, the format uh, shining a light on their work in the industry and how they broke into the music industry as whether it's a supervisor, uh, Elaine is now the VP of branding and strategies at So Stereo, and basically cultivating an open dialogue of being AAPI in the entertainment industry. I go back to when I started out, Angela Leas and Rudy Chung were fellow AAPI colleagues, and I would see them at events. And there were a handful of us. And going back to the 90s, even less so, and sort of, the tropes or the stereotypes of, oh, you're Asian American, so you must be a finance or a tech guy. When I was at
Hmm.
Capital, I'm not a creative. But of course, I always rocked either I had long hair like an artist
I
or
saw a picture of you with that. Yeah.
right, with Al Green.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and similarly, same with that's why I'll also, you know, do a panel in June. Because similarly, whether it's by POC, AAPI, the opportunities for our fellow colleagues, within this industry, we need each other to continue breaking down barriers. And also, what I always like to say from our first panel, we had Ruby Ibarra, who's a prolific rapper. And also, she was in The Cleaning Lady as a composer. But these alliances across cultures, we're creating our own opportunities creatively, create our own table in front of and behind the camera. So, what better way to ensure whether it's uh, the next Shogun or the next hidden, show that has multicultural storytelling, in ensuring that there's authentic storytellers behind the scenes. And to, flip it, I think it's a show called Mo on Netflix. Have you seen it's shot in Houston? Have you
I
seen
see the
Mo?
first episode, yeah, of that. Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah, perfect example of, talking about what's happening in Palestine. And then I know uh the composer, I'll have to pull it up, was a rapper, so a lot of Houston-based hip hop, but the music supervisor is Palestinian, if I'm not mistaken. And again, just threading that needle of authentic storytelling through the lens of AAPI is what the virtual panel is going to be. We can drop a link. It's free. Anyone can sign up. And then if you sign up before May 2nd, you'll get a free playback. And we try and do that every year for AAPI month. And something leading from one step to another. I'm excited to share. I'm actually producing a couple educational panels with the Guild of Music
Oh,
Supervisors.
nice.
And yeah, so August, one of those I'm pitching is on the DEI lane, and we'll see what nets out. But again, just building on the community that we've created and getting out and enforces and a tip of the hat. Chris Lakey from Cobalt had shared on his socials. I think it was 3 4 years back, uh, within the BIPOC community, the numbers of representation at the Guild of Music Supervisors was a handful. You recently posted a photo. Now it's like 100 150 folks at the GMS.
Right.
So I said, hey, let's build that together. Those alliances, AAPI, people of color, brown, yellow, we're in the industry together. And I want to see that patchwork collage, if you will, because that's what I came up with at Capitol Records back in the day.
Oh,
And,
okay.
you
Nice.
know, we all bleed one color, music.
Right. Definitely.
So,
I love that you have that advocacy. I think that it's important to show the diversity in this space and give people the confidence to kind of step into this lane and not, I think that just bringing different stories from different cultures is important to the landscape of entertainment in general, not just music, but just to be able to share our different experiences because we all experience things very differently, and to be able to kind of just share those experiences with each other to learn and gain more story and gain more just perspective, I think is important for growth, not just for music, entertainment, but for humanity in general. So I love that you're in advocacy for that. I'm excited to see what that is about. And, thank you for creating a platform like that and you and like Chris Lakely and stuff like that, bringing those spotlights to the areas that need to be shined. So yeah, thank you for that, man. I really appreciate that you created something like that. I think that's important. I saw I was there at the GMS Awards both years when they started doing that picture, and I just felt like that it was just powerful because I'm mixed black and white, and I think it's like powerful to see people who are you're connected to, whether not you may not know them, but you share some similarities, and I think it's important to kind of like bridge those gaps. So yeah, thank you for that.
Quite welcome. And I think, would you agree, Nathan? It's daunting at the award ceremony where everyone can get back in their silo. And I love what you did when we had that moment. You said, "Hey, Charles Levan from Blue Buddha." That's all it took. And we had a quick chat, and I said, "Oh man, thanks so much for connecting." And that's all it took. And here we are following up
Right.
on this podcast. So, mutual respect, and the term I use, I remember from coming up in management, is suspending our assumption. The media
Mm,
wants to pit us to get against each other. So we
facts.
all have our internal assumptions, or someone might be tired and they look cross-eyed at us and they're like, "Why are you mad?" I said, "No, the guy's tired."
Right. Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. I love that. So I want to wrap this up by asking a question that I like to ask my guests, and it's Jem Malone, the music supervisor for Euphoria Penguin. She has this playlist that she has on Spotify that's private. It's called a Someday Sync. It's a playlist of all the songs that she hopes to one day place. Is there any song that you wish that you can place? Is there something that you would put at the top of your Someday Sync playlist, and what would it be?
Wow. there there are several, but I'll go with one band that I've worked with over the years, and this cut, and I'll have to share it on a link, and I'll put it actually on socials. You gave me the impetus to share it, and it's a song called California by Flora Cash, and it's just this beautiful acoustic track, and the vocalist and his partner, they live in Sweden, but it's just one of those tracks that, because it's so specific to California, it has to be a very specific placement. And but everyone who knows Flora Cash, I worked with them when they were independent. Then they got signed to a major publisher. I still work with them. They're with Sony Pub, but I can represent their master. But just the marriage of the dark and the light, you know, you hear the vocals of Cole and his wife Espressa, and there's a vibe to the cut, and then the instrumentation kicks in, and it's one of those songs, because it's melancholy, but there's some elements of hope potentially.
Hmm.
It takes me somewhere, and that, weaving it back full circle, Nathan, is get light and dark mixed together, those emotions in a song, and then hopefully the song has resolution. It takes me somewhere, solve a problem. Life is horrible, but this song is going to uplift me. And as a listener, that's what I'm looking for. Similarly, as a sync agent, something that moved me. Maybe has earworm, gives you. I'm hearing that hook all day. I'm
Mm,
singing it, and that is, and it's a feeling. You and I, once we hear a cut within 30 seconds, it can take us somewhere, and then we'll listen further to see what's there. So
100%.
California by Flora Cash, it would be one of those cuts.
Awesome. I have to check that out. Yeah, I saw that you have like a public playlist on Spotify too that you kind of curate with different tracks that maybe you'd be listening to it too as well. I recommend people looking that up. It's Blue Buddha Entertainment on Spotify as well that I've kind of seen. Um, Charles, thank you so much for joining in. I'm glad that we got to connect on here. It was awesome being able to meet you and now cultivating this conversation. It felt like just a regular conversation that I would have. So thank you so much for being on. Thanks for all you do for the independent artist inside of our industry. And thank you for bringing such a positive energy to this landscape.
Nathan, thanks so much for the initial invite. And here's to collabs, and let's keep building. And I appreciate you. And we'll keep going. And it's all opportunity out there. So I appreciate you, Nathan, as well.
100%.